Commendatore.
David Chase's television masterpiece, The Sopranos, fundamentally rewired the DNA of the anti-hero drama.
Cocksuckers.
It was never merely a show about the Italian-American mafia.
I'm not gonna take my pants off until I know this prick is gonna x-ray me again.
It was a sprawling, novelistic exploration of American decline, moral rot, and the agonizing complexities of human psychology.
Tom, what if this didn't go back? Be a problem.
As the series entered its sixth and final season, the looming specter of death, always a occupational hazard for the characters, began to take on a heavier, more metaphysical dimension. This thematic shift reaches its absolute zenith in the opening arc of Season 6.
My ma? Who the fuck would take care of her if something happens?
Following a sudden, near-fatal gunshot wound inflicted by his Uncle Junior, Tony Soprano is thrust into a medically induced coma.
His eyes are open. 2, 3.
Instead of utilizing a traditional, surreal dream sequence or fading to black, the narrative plunges Tony and the audience into a meticulously constructed, terrifyingly mundane alternate reality. Here, Tony assumes the identity of Kevin Finnerty.
Welcome to the Omni.
Name is Finnerty.
An ordinary precision optics salesman stranded on a business trip in Costa Mesa, California.
Tell me about Costa Mesa.
Around here, it's dead.
This purgatorial sequence is not just a narrative detour. It is a profound metaphysical reckoning.
You realize I can't even get on a plane without a picture ID?
Stripped of his power, his syndicate, and his psychological armor, Tony is forced to confront his mortality, the karmic weight of his sins, the terror of losing his identity, and the primordial anchor of love that pulls him back from the precipice of oblivion.
Dude lost his wallet and briefcase.
Damn.
To understand the profound nature of this sequence, one must first deconstruct Kevin Finnerty, the alter ego Tony inhabits in this liminal space.
I'm not Kevin Finnerty.
In the waking world, Tony Soprano is an apex predator. He is a man defined entirely by his physical intimidation.
Would you like anything else?
His grotesque wealth, his violent authority, and his unyielding control over his environment in New Jersey.
This ain't gonna happen to one of my players.
Kevin Finnerty is the stark antithesis of this existence. Finnerty speaks without Tony's trademarked thick Jersey accent. His voice is softer, hesitant, and laced with a desperate confusion.
I'm not Kevin Finnerty.
Lose your arrogance.
He is vulnerable, frustrated, distinctly unremarkable. He has lost his wallet and his identification, leaving him fundamentally separated from his own selfhood.
I'm lost.
The choice of his profession, a precision optics salesman, is laden with devastating irony.
You never did tell us how you made the jump from selling patio furniture to precision optics.
Well, like my wife says, that's a good question.
Tony Soprano is a man who notoriously lacks self-reflection and true vision regarding the moral consequences of his actions.
Are you in the mafia?
I'm in the waste management business. Everybody immediately assumes you're mobbed up.
He is willfully blind to the suffering he causes, deflecting blame onto his mother, his upbringing, or the nature of the gain.
We're soldiers, you know. Soldiers don't go to hell.
Finnerty represents the man Tony might have been had he not been born into the toxic legacy of the DeMeo crime family, an ordinary citizen plagued by the mundane, quiet anxieties of middle-class life. Yet, even in this sanitized, beige alternate reality, Tony cannot escape the looming shadow of his true nature. The universe of the coma dream is constantly trying to correct itself, to force Tony to recognize the spiritual debts he has accrued over a lifetime of violence and exploitation.
How fortuitous we should meet up with you again. Well, we are now filing suit against you.
This theme of inescapable spiritual debt is brilliantly manifested through Finnerty's interactions with a group of Buddhist monks. In the sequence, Finnerty is embroiled in a bizarre lawsuit with a monastery over a faulty heating system he allegedly sold them.
We had a horrible winter at the monastery because of your heating system.
The visual of Tony Soprano, a man deeply embedded in the Catholic guilt and visceral violence of the mafia, arguing with peaceful, ascetic Buddhist monks creates a jarring and meaningful dissonance. The monks function as spiritual arbiters, the quiet judges of his personal purgatory. When they accuse him of fraud and demand accountability for the heating equipment, a subtle, unmistakable allusion to the fires of hell and damnation, Tony's instinctive defense is to declare,
Look, I'm not Finnerty. I didn't sell you this heating equipment.
This denial operates on multiple levels. Literally, the dreaming Tony is asserting that he is not the man they claim him to be. He is
Anthony Soprano.
Metaphysically, however, he is denying his own culpability, just as he does in the waking world. Throughout his life, Tony constantly compartmentalizes his actions, refusing to take ultimate moral responsibility. The monk's insistence that he must face the lawsuit is a cosmic demand for accountability. One of the monks pierces through Tony's defenses with a line that serves as the thesis statement for Tony's entire waking life.
Yesterday,
Yes, tell us. There's no fraud without a fairy tale.
Tony's life as the good family man, providing for his wife and children, is the fairy tale. The murder, extortion, and misery that fund it are the fraud. Furthermore, when Tony tries to shift focus back to the mundane details of his missing wallet, a monk gently reminds him of the ultimate ego death of mortality.
One day we will all die. We'll be the same as that tree. No me, no you.
This philosophy of interconnectedness and the dissolution of the ego is entirely alien to a man whose entire existence is predicated on dominating others. The psychological horror of the purgatory sequence deepens significantly when Finnerty, sitting isolated in a dimly lit hotel bar overlooking the city, confesses to a bartender that he has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease.
I was diagnosed, actually, with Alzheimer's.
This is perhaps the most revealing moment of the entire coma arc. In the waking world, Tony's greatest fear is the loss of his mind and his faculties.
Malanga.
Pushy Malanga's dead. 6 years now.
This terror is entirely catalyzed by watching the slow, agonizing mental decay of Uncle Junior, the man who shot him in a state of paranoid dementia.
Uncle John!
By projecting this diagnosis onto Kevin Finnerty, Tony's subconscious is grappling with the ultimate loss of control. Alzheimer's represents the total erasure of the self. For a man like Tony Soprano, whose entire power structure relies on his memory remembering slights, holding grudges, tracking debts, and leveraging history, the prospect of his identity dissolving into nothingness is a fate worse than physical death. As he sits at the bar, nursing a drink, the profound loneliness of the human condition is laid bare. He is in exile, disconnected from his history, facing the vast, empty void of his own mind. He notes to the bartender that his uncle has memory loss.
Well, my uncle has memory loss. Maybe it's hereditary.
Someone's probably studying that.
The bartender's casual indifference to Finnerty's existential terror only amplifies the cold, unforgiving nature of this purgatorial way station. He is not the boss, he is just another dying man in a bar.
Do I blame myself for this life? The shit that happens? Like what puss?
The brilliance of the Mayhem episode lies in how the clinical reality of the hospital room bleeds into the dream state, driving the narrative toward its climax. His physical body reacts violently to the stimuli around him. Nowhere is this more apparent than during the visit from Polly Walnut Squaltieri. Polly, one of Tony's oldest and most gratingly self-centered captains, sits by Tony's bedside and begins a loud, stress-inducing monologue. Polly rants about the stresses of the mafia life, his grievances, and the betrayals of their associates.
Stand up one day, FBI rat fuck the next.
In the hospital room, the monitor shows Tony's heart rate steadily climbing. From a resting rate to 54, hitting tachycardia, Polly's toxic presence, representing the overwhelming stress, paranoia, and inescapable toxicity of Tony's waking life, literally drives Tony's physical body toward cardiac arrest.
The fuck?
In the dreamscape, this real-world agitation manifests as a sudden, urgent push toward resolution.
I felt it right here.
Will you please shut up in there?
The stress of being Tony Soprano is killing him, propelling Kevin Finnerty closer to the afterlife just to escape the noise. As the narrative progresses, Finnerty receives an invitation to a Finnerty family reunion at a place called the Inn at the Oaks.
Yes, the Inn at the Oaks. What is that beacon, anyway?
The journey to the inn feels mythic, almost Homeric. He drives down a dark, winding road enveloped by a dense, foreboding forest. The imagery evokes the opening lines of Dante's Inferno. Midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself within a forest dark, for the straightforward pathway had been lost. Tony is navigating the dark wood of his own soul. When he arrives, the Inn at the Oaks stands as a massive, traditional white house illuminated by an eerie, ethereal glow against the pitch-black night. The celebration inside appears warm, but it is an unnerving warmth, the seductive, fatal comfort of the afterlife. The attendees are obscured, shadowy figures moving gracefully behind the windows. The concept of the family reunion in this context is chilling. It is a gathering of the dead, the ghosts of the family and the Soprano bloodline waiting to welcome him into the fold. At the threshold of the inn, Finnerty is met by a sharply dressed concierge holding a clipboard.
Is this the Finnerty reunion?
They're waiting for you.
Me?
Tony murdered Blundetto with a shotgun, sparing him a more gruesome torture at the hands of Phil Leotardo. Blundetto's presence as the gatekeeper of the afterlife is drenched in unresolved guilt. The concierge does not speak with the familiar, colloquial cadence of his cousin. His demeanor is formal, detached, and relentlessly calm. When Finnerty uses a mild expletive, the concierge gently chides him,
Has Kevin Finnerty arrived?
We don't talk like that here.
What do you mean?
effectively stripping away the aggressive, masculine posturing of the mortal world. He is the ferryman on the river Styx, patiently waiting to escort Tony to his final destination.
Your family's in sight.
What family?
They're here to welcome you.
The central conflict at the threshold of the inn revolves around Finnerty's briefcase. The concierge politely but firmly insists that Finnerty must relinquish the briefcase before he can enter the reunion.
Everyone's in there. You can't bring business in there.
The briefcase is the masterful focal point of the sequence's symbolism. Throughout the coma dream, Finnerty has clung to this briefcase as if his life depended on it, because, in a metaphysical sense, it does.
Briefcases aren't allowed. Please, let me take that from you.
The briefcase contains his earthly identity, his sins, his attachments, his ego, and the unimaginably heavy burden of being Tony Soprano. It is the literal baggage of a corrupt, violent life. The concierge notes that the briefcase looks incredibly heavy.
Looks like it weighs a ton.
I don't want to.
To hand it over is to accept death, to allow the self to be annihilated, and to cross over into the great unknown. Tony hesitates. His primal survival instinct, the same ruthless instinct that makes him a formidable mob boss, flares up even at the gates of eternity. He expresses a deep, childlike fear of what lies inside the inn. The figure of a woman appears briefly in the glowing doorway, partially obscured. Her silhouette and the way she is framed are strikingly reminiscent of Livia Soprano, Tony's toxic, unloving mother. The implication is staggering. The afterlife waiting for Tony is intrinsically tied to the psychological wounds inflicted by his mother. He is being called to return to the dark, suffocating womb from which he spent his entire life trying to escape. The concierge extends his hand, waiting to take the briefcase.
You need to let go.
At this precise moment, the cinematic genius of the sequence reaches its zenith. As Finnerty stands frozen at the threshold, teetering on the edge of surrender, the physical world violently intrudes. In the dream, the visual field is suddenly overwhelmed by a blinding, pulsing white light. The manifestation of the defibrillator shocks attempting to jumpstart his dying heart. But the medical intervention alone is not what saves Tony. What pierces the veil between life and death is the sound of a voice carried on the wind rustling through the dark trees surrounding the inn.
Please don't leave us, Daddy. We love you.
It is the voice of a young girl, his daughter, Meadow, crying out from the hospital room. The intrusion of Meadow's voice serves as the ultimate anchor to the living world. In the universe of The Sopranos, a show heavily populated by sociopaths, routine betrayals, and purely transactional relationships, genuine, unconditional love is a rare and fragile commodity. Meadow represents Tony's purest connection to humanity. She is the legacy he always wished he could have kept clean from the rot of his lifestyle. Hearing her voice echoing through the trees of the underworld creates an agonizing emotional crescendo. The voice does not command him to fight, it begs him to stay. It reminds him that despite all his monstrous deeds, his infidelities, and his violence, he is tethered to the earth by the profound love of his children. The wind blowing through the trees at the inn at the Oaks physically pushes against Finnerty. He looks toward the trees, toward the source of the voice, turning his gaze away from the concierge, away from the glowing doorway, and away from the seductive oblivion of the inn. He refuses to hand over his baggage. He refuses to surrender his identity, no matter how heavy it has become. The blinding white light overtakes the screen one final time, and with a sudden, violent gasp, Tony Soprano opens his eyes in the sterile, fluorescent reality of the hospital room. The dream collapses, the purgatory dissolves, and the mob boss returns. The Kevin Finnerty coma sequence is an unparalleled achievement in television narrative because it resolutely refuses to offer easy answers or unearned catharsis. Traditional television logic dictates that a character surviving such a profound brush with death must emerge fundamentally transformed. But The Sopranos is a tragedy, not a morality play. Tony wakes up, but he does not return as a changed man. The agonizing experience in purgatory does not lead to a lasting moral redemption. He does not abandon the mafia. He does not repent for his sins. He does not treat those around him with newfound grace. Instead, the sequence serves to infinitely deepen the tragedy of his character. It proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that Tony Soprano is capable of profound existential depth, that his subconscious fully understands the terrifying spiritual consequences of his life, and that he feels the heavy, agonizing guilt of the lives he has destroyed. Yet, upon returning to the waking world, Tony willfully suppresses this enlightenment. He continues down his destructive path, unable or unwilling to change his nature, barreling toward the show's fateful, ambiguous conclusion in Holston's Diner. Ultimately, Season 6, Episode 3 of The Sopranos utilizes this purgatorial detour to distill the entire thematic essence of the series into a single haunting cinematic arc. It is a meditation on the inevitability of death, the inescapable nature of guilt, the terrifying fragility of human identity, and the desperate, primal strength of love. By placing the brutal, unyielding mob boss in the vulnerable shoes of an ordinary man lost in a strange land, the show exposes the terrified, trembling soul beneath the armor of violence. The Inn at the Oaks remains out there in the dark woods of Tony's subconscious, its lights glowing, its concierge waiting patiently for the day when the briefcase will finally become too heavy to hold, and Tony will have no choice but to let go and walk through the door.